Welcome to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. Established in 2016, the Fintech Times is a global multimedia news outlet centered around the world's first leading fintech newspaper. We report on the latest and brightest ideas from the fintech world. Follow the conversation using hashtag TFD News and Views and follow us at the Fintech Times. Hello, and welcome back once again to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. I am joined as ever by the wonderful Francis and the wonderful Tom. How are you guys doing this week? How's it going? What's new in your life? Francis, go.
That is the best intro I think we've ever had on this podcast. I'm here for it. Yeah, no, I'm doing well. It's been a pretty fun week, I suppose, at the Fintech Times. Just been a lot of fun topics to discuss, and I'm doing well. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing pretty well. It's I don't like the question "What's new in your life?" because most of the time, absolutely nothing. It's the same every week, but no, it's good to be back. It's the weather's still. I always go to the weather because that's the classic intro. I feel like for the podcast, but the weather's looking pretty nice today. It's been a bit dodgy the last couple of weeks, so I'm getting back in the mood, and I'm ready to get started today.
Fantastic. So let's talk about some fintech then. What are you guys going to be bringing to the table this week? Tom, what is your article?
So this week I'm going to be talking about the rise of FinTok, and that's basically financial education on TikTok. After I interviewed the head of finance in the UK for the platform.
Fantastic. And Francis, how about you?
I'm going to be taking a deep dive into the world of subscriptions and how, having an all-in-one platform to unsubscribe can be extremely helpful for both merchants and consumers.
Excellent stuff. And I'm going to be looking at open banking and a new NatWest report on how we can help open banking achieve its full potential. But Tom, I'm going to make you go first because I know you had a very exciting time talking to literally TikTok earlier this week. So tell us more about it.
Well, you're spot on. It was a great time. We learned a lot about finance on TikTok. So the article basically came from an interview I did earlier this week with Daniela Saleh, and she's essentially the head of finance for TikTok in the UK. And basically, she deals with a lot of the financial brands and firms that are producing content and advertising on the platform. And I just thought it was a really interesting topic because, as someone, I use TikTok quite a lot just for entertainment purposes. And you do see a lot of these financial brands and banks sort of engaging. They're using, different trending like memes and sounds and songs and just different trends to gain a following. And I often wondered, what they're really getting out of it. Like, obviously, it's a lot to do with building an audience. And I guess my sort of preconception was that a lot of people don't really trust the banking sector or even the finance sector much. And this is just a new way to engage with an audience. But by talking to Daniela, we learned a little bit more about basically what they're getting out of it. And I learned that basically a lot of these financial firms are using TikTok as a platform to engage with their audience and just teach them new everyday useful information about their finances. It could be explaining financial jargon or new political developments that might affect their finances, talking about rising interest rates, those kind of things. And Daniela gave me quite a good few quotes, to be fair. But she basically said that most of the time, these banks are trying to present complex financial products that need an element of humanization. So she was talking to me about how the likes of Monzo, Revolut, and Starling Bank have all done a really good job of producing educational content alongside more light entertainment. And she said that a big part of it is they use a lo-fi type of approach. So they're not just producing what you'd see in an advert on TV. It's not studio produced. It is quite literally someone, an employee or a creator that they've brought in just on their phone or iPad using the features of TikTok to create content. And I guess it just creates more of a personalized feel for users. But what I found most interesting from the interview was just about how TikTok's making financial education quite easy to access. And you'll now have a lot of different sources. I feel like in the UK, especially, in the past, we haven't really had that many sources that we can go to. The main one that comes to mind for me, at least, is Martin Lewis and Money Saving Expert. It's the one place to get good financial information that is going to be correct. I think it's quite easy a lot of the time to look up different finance related topics on the internet and not really know if what you're reading is correctly laid out, if it's misinformation or not. And TikTok's making it quite easy to gain access to, these different like banking institutions or fintechs, who, obviously it's in their best interest to give you the correct information as well. So I thought it was just a really interesting way that, financial education is changing at the moment. But, also on the same side of that, you also get, if there's 1 billion people on the platform, different users, millions and millions using it every day, there's also going to be people spreading misinformation and scammers. Anyone can make content, so anyone can make any kind of content they want on the platform. And, I basically went into a deep dive with Daniela about, how TikTok are kind of trying to combat that. So they're working with like the FCA to regulate financial advertising on the platform in the UK. They launched a campaign called hashtag fact check your feed campaign in 2021, and that just tries to remind people to stay vigilant when they're using TikTok, that not everything they see is correct. They've partnered with Citizens Advice to create educational content about finance, and like if you just search for any like trending hashtags about finance, or you look up mortgage advice or any kind of financial term on the search bar, you get like a financial advice reminder that pops up. You might have seen it if you've used TikTok before, and it just reminds the users that all the investments that they see on the platform, all investments are risky, and not to believe everything you see on the platform, to do further research before you dive into anything, basically. But I really just wanted to get both your opinions on both the sort of financial advice and educational side of TikTok that's really growing at the moment, as well as this sort of growth of misinformation and how they should be combated. So, Francis, I'll come to you first. What's your take on like getting your financial education from TikTok?
I mean, I think the conversation with Daniela was really good because it sort of takes in all aspects of, the different sides of financial education and like the risks involved with an app like TikTok. I mean, I think when we were sort of discussing what articles we were going to talk about today, one of the biggest things that I sort of noted beforehand was that I think it should be a gateway to finance as opposed to the end goal of finance, if that makes sense. In sort of the sense that, if you hear something on the platform that you like, then you should then investigate it more yourself before sort of, running with that, signing up for it or whatever it might be. And I mean, that sounds very simple, of course, but I mean, like, it's like you said, right, with these big financial organizations and financial institutions, they're trying to make, relatable content and, humanizing stuff like the lo-fi production of things. And I mean, I do agree that, that is a way to make it relatable to consumers and to make it, something that they can find some humor in. And, if you find something that's humorous, you're probably going to stick with it, right? In a weird way, I think, finances are something that you need an element of complexity about them, to an extent at least, because I think you can't really be talking about complicated services in a simple way without potentially misleading consumers. And I think that's the last thing that an organization wants to do, right? Is to sort of say, oh, we have this service, it's really simple, but then of course there's like the T's and C's applied to it. And then suddenly the consumer's sort of trapped in something that they don't know what they're doing. They're either losing money, they've misplaced money, and then it's this whole journey to try and get it back and to sort everything out. So I think in that regard, I think there needs to be some sort of, I don't really know how the best way to describe it, but just sort of like almost, perhaps it's more on the consumers than it is on the organizations themselves. Because I mean, it's like one of the, like we've sort of spoken about before, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink it. I mean, you can provide them with the services, but I mean, if they're not going to learn about them, then that's on them. But I thought it was a really interesting discussion, in the fact that it is recognized that there is such a possibility for misinformation on the app, and that it is trying to do things to avoid it. I just think you've got to be careful in sort of this sort of get rich quick world that a lot of people live in. I mean, I know that I'm talking for a while, but I mean, those. I don't know if you guys have seen them. Those ads on like YouTube where somebody goes, "Oh, I made like 2K in like a week or something like that, and you could too." And it's just that those sort of things that it's like it's just too good to be true. And I guess that is an old adage as well, that if you see on TikTok, if it's too good to be true, then it probably is. But all in all, I thought it was a really interesting conversation that you had with Daniela, and that it does really uncover that there is potential on TikTok, of course, to help people understand. It's just, in my opinion, I don't think it's like the be all end all answer. I think it's like I said, the gateway to it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think one thing you said is like there is this potential to oversimplify different financial things and therefore mislead people, even if that's not the intention. But I think that's why I found this sort of trend of these brands aren't necessarily like they're not just promoting their products. It does seem to be more of a focus on, this bank Revolut is teaching you about this financial jargon and you can trust it because it's coming from Revolut, and they're almost using that as a way to gain a bigger audience, make Revolut a bigger name in the UK to the UK audience, and then attract more people to think about Revolut when they're thinking about switching banks or trying out a new financial service. So I think all in all, it generally seems to be a more of a way to become trusted, become the most trusted, I guess, brand to the UK audience, and see how that can affect bringing more people in the future. But yeah, it just seems like an interesting space that obviously there is a lot of potential like misinformation and areas that need to be improved. But what's your take on it, Polly?
Yeah, I won't say too much because you guys have covered it really well so far, and it was a really interesting feature to read, Tom. So well done for that. But I think in general, I think it's brilliant, And when you think about what we talk with financial education and everything, what we've said previously about that, I think TikTok is a really great. I think TikTok is a really great way to help get that to the masses. Obviously, like you've said, you've got to take it with a pinch of salt. You've got to really be careful about the information that's being put out there. But I think it's good to see that TikTok are doing something about that, which is fantastic. But all in all, if you've got a resource that people are going to be using, you may as well capitalize on that. And I think some of the accounts that are on there giving out, financial advice, maybe not advice, I know some people don't like to use that word, but like giving out information about finances. I love Martin Lewis. Martin Lewis is my life. I adore him. But there are so many on there giving out really great information and advice, and it just makes sense to use it. TikTok is getting to be one of the sort of highest search engines on the internet. And it's kind of no different to what YouTube was a few years ago. YouTube was also one of the highest ranking search engines on the internet for people looking for information. So it makes sense to get it in TikTok, and then you get information in like nice little bite-sized chunks. So I think it's just a win-win. Obviously, we've got to be careful with the information, like you guys have been saying. We've got to make sure people are staying safe, but when it comes to actually just giving out information, like explaining different jargon, explaining what different kinds of mortgages are, what all these different like inflation rises mean for actual individual people, I think on that front it's just fantastic. And I really hope it carries on and people continue to really start garnering the education around finances in that way, because I think this could be, not to sound too dramatic, but kind of like what we're missing when we talk about financial education. We always talk about how we need more of it and how people need to have that access, but how do you get that access? And something like this, I think, is kind of how you do it. So very exciting, very, very big fan.
Yeah, and I think just to like conclude, I think it's really interesting how, at least for me, I think if you just spread correct financial information and you're teaching people about confusing terms and you're simplifying topics that may be confusing for them, they're not understanding how to best manage their money. You're just teaching people things that is correct. That is inevitably also going to have an impact on how many people are falling for scams, how many people are being tricked by people on the platform already. Because the more people know about finances and about financial jargon, the less easily they're going to be sucked into someone saying, invest in this because it's guaranteed to make you money. The more people are aware just about finances in general, then the better off they're going to be when sort of navigating this platform that could have a lot of misinformation as well. So yeah, I just thought it's all heading in the right direction based on the conversation.
Awesome stuff. Thank you, Tom. So, Francis, do you want to go first or shall I go first? Shall I go second? I'll go second to mix it up. I always go last. So today, I wanted to look at how NatWest has identified 3 ways to help open banking achieve its full potential. So the British banking and insurance company has commissioned Oxera, I hope I'm saying that right, which is a finance and economics consultancy firm, to look into some of the challenges that are holding open banking back. And also kind of the development of new innovative use cases that can go beyond the regulatory mandate. So I feel like open banking was pretty big a big topic in the fintech world, sort of maybe more so a couple of years ago, but still obviously very prevalent now. But I think open banking has kind of shifted slightly, at least in the way that we're thinking about it. And I know last year there was quite a few sort of people in the industry kind of speaking out about open banking and how maybe it's not as cool as we think it is. And then others are saying that open banking isn't really achieving its full potential. And then other voices as well that are sort of, we're kind of transitioning from open banking into more of like an open finance kind of space. So there's always a lot of sort of, what's the right word? There's always a lot of discussion when it comes to open banking, kind of what that means for both businesses, consumers, and the industry in general. So this report has identified sort of some of the economic challenges that are preventing open banking from reaching its full potential. And these include a lack of commercial incentives to develop or enhance APIs and a lack of alignment between ASPSPs, which is account servicing payment service providers, for example, banks. And this is on the benefit of open banking. So there are also a lot of significant challenges when we think about sort of like managing trade-offs, particularly an example in relation to security and convenience within the open banking ecosystem. So interestingly, the report also offered sort of ways forward to help address these challenges. Which two of which are already under discussion. So these are to mandate banks to offer a wider range of use cases, to commercialize APIs to encourage banks to expand open banking use cases through premium APIs, and then also introducing a multi-party system, which would be to enable multi-party systems to emerge that have a commercial incentive to grow the open banking ecosystem through the design of new flexible frameworks for industry collaboration. So I think it's really interesting, and I think the report definitely makes it clear that banks, fintechs, and regulators kind of need to work together in order to get open banking to achieve kind of what it could be achieving, to really reach that full potential that people keep talking about, and to sort of get some more interesting range of use cases there. And I guess the recommendations in this report are kind of hoping that that will happen. I guess what I wanted to talk about with you guys today was kind of where you think open banking is at the moment. What kind of things are you seeing in the industry? Is open banking kind of still the big thing right now, or have we moved on to other things? What are your thoughts on just open banking kind of as a general question? And then I guess, do you agree with the report? Do you think things are holding it back to reaching its potential? Tom, I'm going to go to you first.
Yeah, I think this is a cool article because it kind of outlines exactly the problems, I guess, with open banking and why it hasn't necessarily fulfilled the potential that perhaps a couple of years ago we thought it will have done. I was actually surprised by the stat at the start of the article, like only 10% of consumers and SMEs are using open banking. Because I did think at this point, it was such a sort of big element that more people would have engaged with it. I remember there was a report earlier in the year that showed like all of the top or the biggest six banks in the UK had all fulfilled their sort of obligations to that were set out to them to sort of try and enhance how many people use an open banking. And the fact that that happens, at the start of the year, and still only like 10% of consumers are actually and SMEs are using this, maybe shows that it's still got a long way to go, and it hasn't had the success that maybe we expected it to have. I think it, obviously the potential for what open banking can offer consumers, especially, is like really obvious. It could have really big benefits for people just generally, in organizing their finances, getting access to different services. Obviously, it hasn't quite happened, and I think maybe as you said, there's a big need for collaboration, and if people aren't aligned, if all these banks, fintechs, and regulators they're not aligned, then we're not going to get the results that we're hoping for. There needs to be some sort of alignment in, it can't just be NatWest trying to pave the way. Everyone needs to kind of have their input and really work together. Without this kind of collaboration, that's never going to happen, and we're never going to see the full potential of what open banking can offer. So I just thought, really, as with kind of most things I think we talk about, it's just that the problem is there's not enough collaboration, and the question is, how can they actually make this collaboration take place?
Yeah, absolutely. I really like everything you said there, and I really agree with it. Francis, what do you think, especially adding sort of Tom's points about collaboration as well? What are your thoughts on open banking in the industry at the moment?
I mean, it's funny you sort of talk about collaboration because that's like literally the big thing that I pulled out of this article as well. I was like, you know, the report highlights the importance of spreading the technology, and it's like Tom just said, right? It's not just on NatWest. Every single organization, every regulator, everyone needs to play their part to help make it more, well, I guess more mainstream, but more achievable, more accessible. All of those sort of things that you want from the technology to really see it, reach its true potential, as sort of is discussed in the article. I think that's like one of the biggest things. And I mean, I know that the article is focusing on Europe, but I thought it was quite prevalent to bring this up as it was just an article that we worked on, or that I worked on, this week as well. And that was this idea that open banking education is a must in Canada, as only 9% of the respondents of the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada's reports, or it only 9% of people have actually heard of it and said that they would work with it. And I mean, when you think about all the potentials that or the potential that the technology has, I think you've really got to sort of highlight the importance of making sure it's accessible to everyone, and that everyone really understands it, so that it can then flourish. And I mean, as we sort of discussed before, is it sort of just the new hype train, right? Is it the new NFT of fintech, or is it something like that? I mean, in my opinion, no. I think it's a lot more applicable and sort of better than NFTs, putting it bluntly. But I definitely think there's still a ways to go, and I think collaboration is probably one organization sort of explaining the benefits to another, that organization then doing the same to the next. It seems almost archaic, that sort of way of working, but there's a reason it worked like that, right? And I think that the more organizations that do sort of take it on, the better everyone will be. More people will be able to reap the rewards.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you've kind of brought up the idea of a hype train. And I totally agree. I think it's gone beyond that. I think when it kind of was first about, there was definitely kind of this idea of the big trending thing and everyone was talking about it and it got that treatment. But now it's really evolved beyond that. And I think we're kind of seeing that in the industry too. So that's a really interesting point. Thank you, Francis. But anyway, yeah, let's move on to Francis, your article. What are you going to talk about today?
Yeah, cheers, Polly. So, last but not least, I wanted to bring the idea of subscriptions, or I suppose unsubscriptions, if you will. The idea of unsubscribing from services, and I mean it's something that's historically been kind of challenging. Yeah, I mean, how many times have we heard somebody talk about a gym subscription, for example? Like somebody will say on the 1st of January, new year, new me, I'm going to start going to the gym, I'm going to start working out every day, blah, blah, blah. We've all heard it before. And then, 2 weeks in, they forget about their membership. The card stays in their wallet. And then they only really remember about it the following January when they say the exact same thing and they've realized they've been paying for it for a year. And I mean, I think a lot of the time, people find it very easy to forget what they're actually subscribed to because, there's different apps, there's different services, there's not really an all-in-one service. So what Mastercard has done, it has partnered with Subaio, I think is how you say it, an alumnus of the company startup engagement program StartPath, to empower consumers to unsubscribe from unwanted services. This solution provides consumers with visibility into their subscriptions, in addition to recurring payments within their digital banking platform, regardless of how the consumer chooses to pay. There is no need to exit one app and log into another. Consumers can now unsubscribe from services directly within their digital banking app through Mastercard and Subaio's partnership. So again, this just goes back to what I said. It's this idea of simplifying, being able to see all your finances in one spot, and then sort of deciding from there what you need and what you don't. So financial institutions that enable consumers to better control their spending can reduce operational costs, while both merchants and issuers can also avoid the costs of disputes and alleviate pressures on call centers. So it's a win-win for everyone. Let's be honest, consumers are lazy. I can't think of a situation where jumping from one app to another would be favorable over an all-in-one situation. And having everything in one place just gives consumers a better overview of their finances and really how much they're spending on subscriptions a month or a year. And I mean, it just helps put things into perspective, as I sort of said. And speaking from a personal experience as well, I know that this has helped me before. I mean, all my living expenses are much easier to manage if I can sort of see how much is being deducted all at once. And then this sort of simplicity, it benefits everyone, and it saves time, it saves, resources for merchants, and not having to deal with calls about unsubscribing or wanting a refund due to an unused membership card. All of that sort of all of those issues, I should say, they can just all be avoided with this sort of partnership. So I think it's, a very, simple but effective thing, and that's why I wanted to bring it to the table today, just to sort of get your guys' views, I suppose, on, have you ever, I guess it's almost from like a personal point of view, have you ever sort of forgotten about a subscription, ended up paying for it for ages, and then just thought, damn, if I'd seen this in, 4 or 5 months ago, would have saved me like 50 quid or something like that. Polly, I'll go to you first.
That exact scenario has happened to me so many times. It is painful. Mostly when I've like signed up to free trials and then forgotten to like cancel or whatever, or like have just completely forgotten that I signed up in the first place. Literally, it's happened to me so many times where I've gone back and gone, God, why do I just, what's this £20 charge coming out of my bank every month? And it's for like a service that I literally haven't used for a year, but have been signed up that entire time. It's happened so many times, which is why I think sort of things like this are a godsend for just consumers in general. I think it's so handy to have, like you say, people are lazy, but not only that, people are just useless and forgetful, and so to have it all in one place is brilliant. But also I think companies, this is like a hot take that might not even be that hot, but I feel like companies make it really difficult to unsubscribe to things a lot of the time. um like, sometimes you'll like, you can subscribe to something in literally like 5 minutes, and then to actually like unsubscribe from it and to stop paying them, you have to like phone 3 different people and get through to a bunch of different departments to finally get your money stop coming out of your account, sort of thing. So to have it all in one place where you can just really easily unsubscribe from things is brilliant, and I love it. And I guess, thinking about, the cost of living crisis and all of that, I think it's handy to a lot of people to be able to kind of have that greater visibility over your spending rather than trawling through statements and stuff, which is pretty easy now with online banking and digital banking apps. And I know a lot of different banking apps offer you like a different ways you can kind of like see your spending and help you budget and things like that. But to have even better visibility over their spending with subscription payments through one single place, I think is really important. And, giving that power back to the consumers, which at the end of the day, we can all get behind because we're all consumers. So, no, I'm a very big fan. I need it and will probably be utilizing this, if not um, a similar solution, because I have so many subscriptions and I don't need them and I keep paying for them, and it's just needs to stop.
It's funny that you were talking about this idea of, it's very difficult to unsubscribe from things. Because I saw an article as well that I recently worked on where it's talking about, the adoption of pausing a subscription. So it's not saying that you necessarily want to unsubscribe. It's just saying, I can't really afford this right now, or it's not something that I'm really making the most of. So I'd just like to pause the subscription. I don't want to sort of delete my data or anything like that. Just put it on stop for a bit, and then maybe come back to it later. And I think that way is probably a lot more effective. I don't know if, perhaps one of those like sign up things that you were just talking about, you don't need it for a bit, but you think actually it might come in handy a bit later down the line, maybe something like that. It I think it just having these options, right? It then stops this complicated unsubscribing service or procedure that you spoke about, which can be such a hassle sometimes. But yeah, Tom, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you both covered it really well. To be honest, I am also a victim of this. I'll say it's because of my own unorganization, really. I mean, I recently realized that I've been paying for the Now TV Entertainment Pass for 4 months because I got the free trial to watch The Last of Us, and then it was only like a few weeks ago I was like, oh, I'm still paying for that, but because you have so many outgoings coming out of my current account, I never noticed before, and it was just by chance I opened my app to look at what's been coming out of my account in the last week or so, realized that had been taken out the day before, and was like, wait, I never cancelled. I just thought I cancelled it and I never had. So this kind of somewhere that you can just centrally see all your outgoings in terms of subscriptions would probably save me who knows how much money a month. But that like prompted me to go back and look for all my subscriptions. I did have 2 or 3 that I wasn't intended to be paying for as long as I ended up paying them. So, these type of solutions are always going to be a positive and a win for the consumer. Just giving them more ways to realize where their money's going and to better display that. So I'm someone that would definitely benefit out of a solution like this. And if Barclays want to implement this ASAP, then please do, because I'm all in and I need to save some more money with features like this.
Definitely. It's simple but effective.
Amazing stuff. Well, thank you guys. That was a really great discussion this week. If anyone wants to read any more about the articles that we've spoken about or anything else about the fintech industry, head on over to thefintechtimes.com, where there are plenty of news, insights, and lovely information all about fintech that you can read. Let's move on very quickly to what I learned this week. Each week, new information crosses our desks, being on the editorial team, that we're learning something new about the fintech industry all the time. So we thought it'd be fun to share that with our listeners. Tom, what have you learned this week?
So this week, I learned that UK Russell Group universities have all agreed to implement AI principles for students and staff. So they're going to help staff train them to equip students to use AI rather than just banning it because they're worried about AI being used for cheating. I guess this is the idea of AI is going to be so important in the future. Let's best equip everyone rather than just, saying it's banned, no one's allowed to use it, and trying to just get rid of it from everyone's lives rather than making it, a useful thing that people can implement. So I thought that was just an interesting thing that's happened this week.
Awesome stuff. Francis, what have you learned this week?
So this week I learned that the Bristol-based lending, open finance and data payment firm MoneyHub is supporting a fundraising campaign in support of Leukemia Care UK, in which a herd of 60 unicorn sculptures have been placed across the city of Bristol and its surrounding areas, and they're going to help boost fundraising efforts, payment methods powered by MoneyHub's advanced technology, which will make it easier and quicker for donations to be made through the simple act of scanning the QR codes attached to each of the 60 unicorn sculptures.
Awesome. So this week I learned that UK banks are showing signs of growth. So the Banker's latest top 1,000 world banks ranking has revealed that the aggregate number of employees at the 6 largest UK banks increased by 0.6%, which is the largest increase in the last decade. So all cool stuff. But awesome, guys. Thank you so much for joining me this week. As always, it has been an absolute pleasure to talk about fintech with you. Have a fantastic rest of your week, and I'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolute delight.
Thoroughly enjoyed. See you guys next week.
Thanks for listening to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. Don't miss next week's episode and continue the conversation using #TFT News and Views and follow us at the Fintech Times.